to a very troubling situation in Georgia where, as we told you last week, that teen suspect was arrested and arraigned after going on a shooting spree at his school, but not before 2 adults and 2 students were killed. And in a rare occurrence, his father, Colin Gray, was arraigned on murder charges as well in that same courtroom. Now, that man's charges stem from buying his admittedly troubled son an AR-15, even after speaking to the FBI about threats that the FBI say were traced back to the then 13-year-old. Reports coming out this weekend that the mother called to the school to warn them that she thought there was something bad brewing that morning. School administrators tried to locate the boy, but couldn't before carnage began. However, the boy reportedly called his mom to apologize before the shooting began. I want to go a little bit in depth on that. And for that, we welcome in federal defense attorney Ron Chapman. Ron, thanks so much for joining us today. So much to unpack here, but let's talk about the parents' role. Dad appears to have been charged as an accessory for buying him the gun. Mom called the school to warn them. You wonder what level of liability they should be charged with in this case. And I'm just going to say what no one else is saying. Again, we had gender confusion with this kid. What is the story here? The statistics on gender-confused children committing crimes is through the roof now. Why?
Well, I think to answer that last question, we're seeing a radicalization of children through some of these woke policies that have bled into our school. That's the reason why we're seeing a large number of children who were bullied, outcast, possibly turning to gender identity issues, and then ultimately ending up with something terrible like this. But let's get to the father. So he was charged with involuntary manslaughter. That is not just being negligent as a parent. That is a charge for the murder of another individual. The way that you get to that in Georgia is you show that the person committed a crime. In this case, what the prosecutor is going to try to do is link up this child neglect charge with the manslaughter charge by making the argument that it is somehow neglectful to give your child a gun after this supposed threat was brought by the FBI. Here's the problem. That is a negligence issue. Handing a gun to a kid after a threat like that is failing to adhere to your duty as a parent. It is not murder. And the concern here, while this is a very tragic event, is that if we start charging parents with murder simply because their child, who is going to be charged as an adult or tried as an adult, committed a criminal act, we have a very slippery slope where just owning a gun and having something bad happen with it is going to be a basis for criminal charges. And that's pretty scary.
Yeah. And what if it was, I just want to add to your thought, what if it were a knife or, any number of other ways that murders happen? I'm just curious, will parents be charged in that too? David, forgive me.
No, all good. Ron, here's a couple of different questions I have for you. But this father could be charged with up to, I think they say, 180 years in jail because they're also putting a cruelty to children charge in there. I'm curious to get your take on that. Also, it does go down a slippery slope because then you have to kind of think about, well, as a parent, did you miss the warning signs or did you purposely miss the warning signs? Were you not as hands-on as a parent? I mean, this kind of raises a whole host of different issues here.
I think it does. And I looked around. I looked to see in Chicago if they're actually charging parents for the death of people when there's gang violence or some sort of murder. And that's not happening at all. And I think what we have here is when there's a lawful purchase of a weapon by a parent, because that was made by the parent, we're seeing charges. We had that happen in the Crumbly case. To the earlier point, yes, this can be extended to a knife, or perhaps even you have alcohol in your home. Your child drinks it, even though they're told not to, and gets out on the road. Are you now guilty of that manslaughter? The problem is that our society has decided to take over parenting responsibilities for everybody, but somehow wants to hold parents on the right, who are lawful gun owners, responsibility for their child's criminal acts. And that's a problem.
You mentioned the Crumbly case out of Michigan. It really set precedents as it relates to starting to charge parents, and in the Crumbly case, convicting parents for the negligence of their child or for actions of their child. It truly set a slippery slope. So do you think that it really has created an environment in which in the future we'll see more parents charged in these sorts of cases involving their children having committed acts of crimes on school campuses in particular?
Absolutely, without a doubt. And that's why there needs to be a full court press on this issue. Let's hold the child who will be tried as an adult responsible for the criminal actions. If there's a mental health issue, let's get that taken care of. If there was negligence by a parent, let's go ahead and charge that if we have an available statute. But what we are not allowed to do is stretch an existing statute related to murder to try to pin it on a parent, despite the fact that we can't prove intent. I wouldn't want, they charged this case very quickly, even though it took a long time to decide to charge the Crumbly parents. I would not want to be this prosecutor holding the bag of this case. It's going to be very hard to prove, and I think this father's defense attorney is going to have a lot of good information and a great legal argument to put on the stand. So hopefully a victory in this case to pare down some of these issues may save this slippery slope from going too far.
But aren't these cases more about sending a message? I'm sorry, if I may just, aren't these cases more about sending a message than necessarily really trying to get a conviction? This is about sending a message nationwide, it seems to me.
Well, that's what we've been seeing with all the Trump cases, right? We charge just to send a message, even though it's going to be very difficult to make that legal argument. We saw that with over 300 charges against January 6 protesters that the Supreme Court just reversed. That's exactly what's happening. We know that we can destroy a life with criminal charges. And so we're just charging the case regardless of whether or not we have the ability to prove it.
Hey, Ron, 20 seconds. Are you surprised that these charges came so quickly? I mean, that was really fast.
Shocking. I couldn't imagine there would be enough of a thorough investigation against this father and what he knew. I also understand that the kid denied making those sorts of threats that were the result of the FBI interview. We would want to flesh that out to see if the father had a reasonable basis to believe that that was true before we charge. And I think they rushed into this. Of course, we're getting close to some elections here, and maybe that's a reason.
Yeah, I wonder if that's also the reason why we know so much more about this shooter, his family, what happened in this shooting in just a matter of days than we do about the shooter of Donald Trump, the attempted assassination. And we know nothing, and the body has now been burned. Ron Chapman, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.